Hey guys, we are going to discuss the difference between parallel lines and perpendicular lines algebraically. We kind of already know what parallel and perpendicular lines are, but we're going to discuss them, what that looks like when we talk about slope. This part of your notes corresponds to homework 4.9, so you should be watching the homework 4.9 video. All right, so parallel lines. Well, what do we know about parallel lines? We know parallel lines are two lines that never intersect. So the definition is two lines that never intersect. Now, algebraically, algebraically just means when we talk equations or numbers. So algebraically, we know lines are parallel if they have the same slope. The same slope. So for example, if you have y equals 2x plus 4 and y equals 2x minus 3, these lines are going to be parallel because think about it. If you were to graph them, here my beginning point is 4, and if you were to go up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, that's what my line would look like. If you were to graph it where your intercept is negative 3, you would still go up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. And that up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1 is the same, so you have parallel lines. So algebraically, parallel lines have the same slope. Okay, perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are lines that intersect at exactly 90 degrees. Okay, so how do we know if two lines are perpendicular? The slope has to be negative reciprocals. Slope is negative reciprocals. So what does that look like? What does that mean? Well, reciprocal we already know, so multiplicative inverse, we already know what the reciprocal is, right? So if I have 4/3, the negative reciprocal means I'm going to flip my fraction, but it's going to be negative 4/3 because in order for lines to be perpendicular, one has to be positive and one has to be negative. So when you look at what we say negative reciprocals is that one of these slopes is negative. One of them is positive. So I'm going to flip the reciprocal, 4/3 becomes 3/4, but one of them has to be negative. So that is a negative reciprocal. If I have something that looks like 2, or 3, let's use 3. Well, 3, remember, it's a rational number, so we can turn it in the form a over b. So 3 over 1. And now that negative reciprocal, I'm going to flip that reciprocal to be 1/3. But if this is positive, this one has to be negative. Okay? And therefore, negative reciprocals are perpendicular lines. So that's algebraically how we know. Okay? So what that would look like is y equals 1/2 x minus 4 and y equals negative 2x plus 3. My slopes are negative reciprocal. So it's just the slope that's a negative reciprocal. This one's positive, this one's negative, and they are reciprocals of each other. So now let's kind of talk about what is a negative reciprocal. It is a fraction that is flipped and the signs are switched. And again, we talked about that. One's positive, one's negative, right? So what is the negative reciprocal of 3/4? Negative 4/3. What's the negative reciprocal of 2? Well, it has to be negative 1/2. And again, if you get confused with that integer, make it a rational number, fit the form a over b, so 2 over 1, flip it, and it becomes negative. The negative reciprocal here is a positive 8/7 because that one's negative. The negative reciprocal here, it's 1, so it has to be negative 1 over 1 or just negative 1. And think about this. This is a special case. Perpendicular lines. You have a slope of 0. What is the only other slope that's going to make it perpendicular? If you have a slope of 0, the only other way to do that is to make it where that skier is dead. So a perpendicular reciprocal of 0 is an undefined slope. So that's a special case. That's going to be something that you want to highlight because you really have to understand 0 versus, I have no idea what I did just there. So let's go back. Yeah, there we go. All right. So highlight that one to make sure you understand it. So now let's do some examples together. It's asking me to determine if segments A, B, and C, D are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So now we know parallel lines, same slope, perpendicular, negative reciprocals, and then neither just means they're not the same. So let's take a look at numbers. I'm going to expand that. Numbers 1 and 2. So over here, I'm going to find the slope of line AB. So I'm going to make my little chart, and I get -2 and 3, 2 and 6. So here I go up 3, here I go up 4, and my slope is 3/4, right? And now let's look at the line CD, do another slope, -1, 0, 3, and 3. So here I go up 3, here I go up 4, and my slope is change in y over change in x, so it's 3/4. Now I look at these lines, same slope, that means they're going to be parallel. Parallel lines have the exact same slope. Okay? Let's take a look at number 3. AB. Here's my slope, -1 and 8, 2 and 6. To go from 8 to 6, I subtract 2. To go from -1 to 2, I add 3. And my slope is -2/3. So what's my slope of CD? I get -1, 2, 3, and 3. So I go up 1, and I go up 4. And then I get a slope of change in y over change in x is 1/4. Do these guys have anything in common? They're not negative reciprocals. They're not the same. So these are neither. They're neither perpendicular or parallel. They're lines that intersect because one's negative and one's positive. So eventually they'll intersect, but they're not specific to parallel or perpendicular. Okay? Let's take a look at number 5. We'll do 5 and 7 together. So again, it's just me doing slope a lot. So if you struggle with how to find slope, this is really going to be a tough session for you. So 0, -2, 0, and 7. So here I'm going to go up 9. Here is 0. Change in y over change in 0, which is you cannot divide by 0. So this slope is undefined. That slope's undefined. Let's take a look at CD. 3, -5, 6, -5. This change in y is 0. This is 3. So my slope is 0 over 3, which means my slope is 0. So here, if you have an undefined line and a 0 slope, these are perpendicular. Oh, that's the sign for perpendicular. I should have told you that earlier. That's the sign for perpendicular. So these are perpendicular lines. All right, let's take a look at number 7. If I can erase this. Okay, so number 7, again, I'm just finding slopes. 3 and 1, 3 and -4. So I go down 5 and 0. So my slope here is 5 over 0, which is undefined. And CD, -4 and 1 and -4 and 5. This is up 4 and 0. So my slope is 4 over 0, which is undefined. Both of them, so my slopes are the same. Even though they're undefined, they're both undefined, making them parallel. So that is my abbreviation for parallel lines right there. Okay, now let's take a look at number 9. How would we do something like number 9? Well, it is in y equals mx plus b, so they've kind of done the work for me if they're given an equation. So now, can I see if these lines are parallel or perpendicular? Well, yeah, it's awesome. Here's my slope. So that slope is 7. Here's my slope. That slope is 7. Same slope, parallel lines. So number 9 is parallel. Let's take a look at number 11. Here I have a slope of -1/3, and here I have a slope of 1/3. One's negative, one's positive, but they're not negative reciprocals. And negative 1/3 and positive 1/3 is not the same. So while they look similar, these guys are nothing. They're neither. They're neither parallel or perpendicular because they're not the same and they're not negative reciprocals. Okay? All right, let's look at 13. 13 is not in y equals mx plus b form. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I need to find my slope here. So now I'm going to find it. I'm going to subtract 5x on both sides. I get negative y equals negative 5x plus 4. I divide everything by a negative 1 to change that sign. So now I have y equals 5x minus 4. So my slope here is 5. And my slope here is negative 1/5. This one's positive, this one's negative, and they're negative reciprocals, so these are perpendicular lines. Okay? All right, let's take a look at number 15. 15, my slope is positive 1, and my slope is negative 1. So these are negative reciprocals of each other. So these are perpendicular lines. Now, here is how I know if you watched this whole video. We're at the very, very end, and I haven't said this. So, a way to test if your lines are perpendicular is that the product of your negative reciprocals will always equal negative 1. So what that means, if you have 1/4 and the negative reciprocal is negative 4/1, when you multiply these slopes, you're always going to get negative 1 as your answer. So negative 8/7, the negative reciprocal is 7/8, and your product is negative 1. Does that make sense? So a way to test to see if it really truly is perpendicular lines, multiply those slopes and see if their product is negative 1, and then you for sure know that you've got it. All right. Good luck, guys. If you need anything, come and see me.